Thanks very much. I don't come from New Zealand, but it's the nicest hat I've got in this weather. People have really asked me. My name is Patrick Loxdale. On the 6th of April 2016, I was sitting at my desk in Plymouth, where I was a practicing orthopaedic surgeon. My oldest son had gone off to university. Younger son Peter was just in his first year 6 at school. Life was in a pretty good place. My wife was a consultant anaesthetist. You know, we'd got through the labours of bringing up teenage children, which had actually been a very good experience for us. And I got a phone call saying my older brother Peter, who quite a lot of people here know, had collapsed, and it transpired that he'd had a massive stroke. Peter had no family of his own. My son Peter, also over there sitting on the straw bales, had always wanted to farm. Ever long before he understood there was a farm in the family, or it might be coming his way, or the value of that. So we had a succession plan for Castle Hill, which has been in the family for a long, long time. I was my brother. I had power of attorney over my brother's affairs, but he'd never shared any business details with me whatsoever. So other than an interest, a surpassing interest, I knew nothing about farming. Anyway, came up here. Peter sadly had a massive stroke. We got him home eventually after a number of months, but the following year he deteriorated and he had a brain tumour, and he passed away in July 2017. So my life changed fairly dramatically from being a surgeon to answering the phone. Excuse me a second. Why did it have to go off there? It's Susan. She gets my wife. To try to learn something about farming, and it's been a steep learning curve, but there's some interesting transferable skills. Now, once I'd hacked into my brother's computers and looked at the accounts, what I realised was that the farm was ticking over fine. It was making a small profit. We had one full-time employee, Geraint, Ellen, his daughter, sitting there. Geraint's just kept us going through a number of years, and pay tribute to him, and also Thomas, who works for us. But once I'd hacked into the accounts, what I realised was we were very dependent on subsidy, and our profit was going to get wiped out by subsidy heading south, pre-planned before Brexit. My brother had taken a farm organic in 2008, and I think, without being critical, we'd never completely got our heads around what organic farming involved and the difference between that and conventional. So it was very easy to see a situation where the farm was on a commercial basis going to start failing, and you know, we've had to look at doing things to change that. Initially my plan had been really just to take a passing interest until my son Peter had finished at Harper Adams, where he subsequently went with his girlfriend Meg there, and they've just finished their degrees there. But I've done a number of courses, including the Prosper from Pasture course that Farming Connect organise, and been very influenced by that. And a few sort of comments over the years have really struck me and drove me to start trying to take things forward and set the farm up for the future. And I suppose the first one was, we're comfortable. I think that was an expression my late brother used, talking about the stocking rate on the farm, and just thinking, well, comfortable's okay, but it's not going to be the future. And then the second thing that really sort of motivated me was the staff here saying, we never have grass in May at Castle Hill, and thinking, why was that? Surely we could do something better. And I think the third thing was a comment, you can't have it both ways, talking about organic farming, saying, you know, essentially if you're an organic farmer, you have to accept less. Soon after I came here, we had the Brexit vote, and one of the things that, you know, looking at the basic sums, it would have been very easy to come out of organic. Financially, it probably made sense. But then when the Brexit vote came along and potentially the lamb market was going to fall through the floor, I figured out that because we sell our lambs to Waitrose, to an internal market, who are a reasonably good supermarket, it made sense to stick with that. So we've stuck with the organic. So, you know, when people say you can't have it both ways, I wanted to have it both ways. I wanted to be organic, and I wanted to have more grass and have a more profitable stocking level. So that's what's driven me. We're carrying on doing the Prosper from Pasture. Tom and Eva Coucher are here, and their son Phil we know quite well, or we met last year. We bought some lambs off Phil. Say again? Yeah, we're going down on Wednesday to get more. He's been hugely influential. We feel that he's about 4 years ahead of where we are, and we're trying to chase up and do that.
You don't have that much grass growing at turnout for lambs, so we kind of give them a bigger area so that the ewes get the best grass, we can keep the lambs feeding well, and then we also just slowly start introducing the rotation in. We started rotational grazing last year for the first time, and we soon discovered that because we were moving animals from one end of the farm to the other in big mobs, it was really affecting lamb performance. So this year we then decided, right, let's start with smaller mobs, give them bigger area, let them mother up, and then move them on slower. And it's made a massive difference to the lambs. And then what we'll do now is we will start splitting these fields down again. So I got an electric fencing system called a Kiwi Tech fencing system. It doesn't have to be a Kiwi Tech fencing system, but what it does, it runs on the side of a quad bike, and so I can drive along and put up an electric fence if it doesn't go wrong in about 5 minutes, and split these fields down. And the only thing that's limiting us now is water points. So we have water points in each paddock, and I can split these fences down so they can have water. And then the problem is, if I lift the fence, they have to be able to go back to the area they just grazed. So we're aiming to give no longer than 3 days on one area. Reasons being because of parasite cycles. So with young lambs, they're very susceptible to worms. And if you leave them in the same area for over 3 days, often the parasites will have hatched the larvae and they will then go back into the sward. They might regurgitate them. And also we had a real problem with cod last year with our lambs. So we whether it's worked or not, we're still finding out. We're part of MSD foot vax trial, and we are trying to just alter things slightly to see if that's going to make a difference. We were having them really tight, but for up to 5 days, and we think that's caused a lot of lameness. So yeah, there's a lot more to do here. These fields haven't been reseeded in anyone's memory that I know of, and when we first came here 5 years ago, they were very heavy in Yorkshire fog, lots of undesirable species. And just from altering the grazing patterns, we've seen huge differences. We've introduced the Italian ryegrass, the Italian ryegrasses, perennial ryegrasses, the clovers, the fescues. All these species that we want as farmers have come back without having to seed. So it doesn't look like your perfect silage ground that a lot of people might expect, but it's a start. And from this, we've taken a lot of, from these fields, we've taken a lot of encouragement of what we can do in the rest of the farm. What we're looking potentially to do in the future now would be adding more water points in, or using movable water troughs to increase the density of the grazing and give even longer rest periods. So I don't think I said, but we aim to at least have a 21-day rest period from grazing to going back to grazing again. And with cattle, we would like to increase that up. Sometimes you're up to 30 days, but we'd like to take that further. And that's also because of parasite burdens giving good long recovery. When we started this rotational grazing, we were so fixated on grazing to a perfect residual, if those of you who know about it, to 1,500 kilos, and that looks quite bare. And that type of grazing was designed out in New Zealand on irrigated dairy farms. They're putting lots of fertilizers down the slurry. And we soon realized that because we're organic, we're not putting those fertilizers down. We were overgrazing our swards badly, and the regrowth was really poor. This year we started grazing. We haven't been grazing the ground as low as we had in the past. We still go on the numbers, we still use the science, but we're just kind of trying to not remove too much of the biomass above ground. And one of the reasons behind that is because if we remove more than 50% of the forage above the ground, the roots will start regressing. They'll start dying off. And we've experienced, we're going through a dry spell now. You start getting the pastures to burn off, and also we get reduced growth. So if we can keep a living root growing into the soil, we will in theory grow more grass, and then we can feed more stock. At the moment, you're looking at there, we are fairly understocked. We've had we lambed 677 ewes this year, 5 years ago we were up to 1,200, so we have reduced those numbers for lots of reasons I won't explain at the moment, but we've increased our cattle numbers, and we are slowly going to start rebuilding now that we have produced more grass to get on top of this grass, this grass that we have. So this is just the start of it. We will take you up after that to take you up to some other fields, and you can have a better viewpoint of what we're doing elsewhere. So the electric fencing, these are us about electric fencing. So what we do, like I said, in the spring we put these, you can see, I don't know if you can see, but just about the yellow posts, we put these electric fences out to split the fields down. And the reason we do that rather than putting stock fencing up, but some people might be thinking, is because we can move those electric fences when and if we want to cut silage or if we want to graze in a different way. And the reason behind that is we can then graze the fields in a different way. You can have a different impact from the animals in different ways, the way they trample, the way they move through the sward. But they get put out at the beginning of the spring, so they take quite a bit of time to put out. It goes in one reel, we just go back and forward, walk back and forward and put them out, but they stay put. But when we come to split down more fields, and we'll see some examples later, we have this Kiwitech system, and seriously, I could split that field down in half again, or I could split it down into quarters. You know, it won't take much longer than 10-20 minutes when it goes well.
How often would you move them?
And often it depends on how the animals graze, but they have no longer than 3 days. No longer than 3 days.
Why haven't you let them graze right up to here? Are you saving that to go kind of?
Well, they do, and it's quite, might not be able to see it there, but there's the old gully there, and I think it's a lot of spoil from when they built the house. So, yeah, we do try to let them graze up to here. You know, we're going to get pick some ewe lambs on Wednesday and hopefully get them in relatively soon, because this is where they're destined for, and we're going to start splitting the fields down. Yeah, to be honest, this year we had that early spring that was really difficult, really cold but dry, wasn't it? And we were kind of glad to be down on stock numbers, and now all of a sudden this summer grass has really taken off. We're desperate for more stock. So yeah, we haven't got everything right this year. I think one of our biggest mistakes was we probably didn't graze intensely enough the fields. You can see you start to go back to seed head. We probably didn't graze them intensively enough back at the late spring, and so they then went to seed head. They didn't remain vegetative. We then topped them probably a fortnight too early, and they've gone straight back to seed.
I think maybe in the last month or so we could have perhaps shut off a couple more fields and taken a silage cut, would have been the other thing to do. We actually managed a difficult April really well here. We didn't turn anything into carpet, so the grass then came away, and as Peter said, we probably haven't got enough stock to keep on top of it at the moment, and we should have managed that just slightly differently. Just talking about the scratching in we did in the what we call three corner field right at the end of the park here. We did that last year just before the drought using a guttler machine and put in some ryegrass and clover into what had become a very poor field, but in the past had been used for growing barley, so there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it. And we thought the guttler would be a good idea, and then the drought came, so we hadn't really got a clue whether it worked or not, and last year looked upon it as a bit of a waste of money. But we probably don't have time to walk down there now, but if you look at it now, the amount of ryegrass and clover in that field is massively improved. One of the things we've learnt, and I'm sure Tom and Eva would have told us this years ago, is that if you're an organic farmer, leaving bare soil isn't really a good thing to do. And we were in a glass tier rotation where we were having to do some ploughing and power harrowing, and some of the fields were getting the hell beaten out of them year after year. And we feel that's a bad thing to do. So we're concentrating now. We've come out of glass tier. We're obviously still in the organic scheme, but we've come out of the glass tier scheme, so we can do things as we see fit rather than as somebody else sees fit. And we're really planning to try and get our grassland good, rather than doing arable farming and trying to grow our own corn, which really doesn't work for us around here, not least because of climate change.
I think as well, I read something somewhere where, if you set stock your fields,
So on my phone.
it will take, and if you set stock your fields for every single patch of ground to be covered by dung, which for us is our main source of fertiliser, it will take 25 years. And you can see that going around, particularly where cattle, dairy pastures, you can see sour grass, and the grass is growing really well, but they don't eat it because it's scented. It's, you wouldn't eat some of a ewe poo, would you? It's scented, but from grazing in a more intense rotational grazing method, they say it takes every year you're covering all your sward or your pasture with that dung. So yeah, we've made the start. We've seen really significant differences. There's a long way to go yet. We're nowhere near the finished article, and pretend we are. But yeah, so the soil health is, fields like this before had been quite badly written off. They were just, classic old parkland. The sheep go in there for a week, they go move on, and we just kind of forget about them. But these fields have given us a lot of encouragement of where we can take this place. They used to grow potatoes there as part of a trial with the university. So it's good quality land, it's not bad quality soil. And that was reseeded, I think, about 8 years ago now. And last year we were looking at it and thinking, right, we're going to have to do something, it needs a reseed. But what we hadn't tried yet, we hadn't put the stock on there to graze it. We'd just taken 3 cuts a year and really taken stuff away from the field, from the soil. And so by grazing it more intensively, we grazed that in the spring when using lambs. It's good quality grass for the using lambs. And then now that sward looks a lot better. We're not even thinking about reseeding it because we don't need to. And it'd be a waste of money, waste of time, and it would reduce our soil health. So I think we probably need to go for lunch now, but we'll carry on later. We'll talk about it. We'll also have a look at our muck store, which has been very much Dad's baby for the last few years, and look about our fertility management in terms of that. So I just coming off the farming topic very quickly for the gamekeepers amongst us. So this is one of our 6 pheasant pens for the local syndicate shoots. So it's not a commercial thing. It's just. Oh, it's not working. Is it working?
Hold on. Try it now.
Hello. Yeah. It's working. So yeah, we got a small syndicate shoot that Owen's part of, and so this is, what we're looking to do now with the syndicate is starting to take things like this woodland, and we need to manage the woodland a bit more. So the shoot's kind of an excuse to do that management a bit better. Owen talked about it in your talk earlier about not clear felling, but felling in lines and stuff like that, in terms of how can we get more ground cover in. We've had experiences of some woods around the farm where the wildlife is better, where the habitat for wildlife is better. We're holding more game, so you get a better shoot. So in theory, keep less pheasants, so have less impact on the environment from what we do. So yeah, so this is one of the pens, and this is just to stop here. This is an excuse to do a bit more woodland management. We're going to start doing more stuff down here, and that's all kind of tying in with our how do we affect the environment from what we're doing. So we like to plant more deciduous trees rather than what a lot has been going on, the old coniferous, and really go back to natural woodland that is managed well for a benefit that makes it worthwhile. So we carry on, and what we're doing up here, we're coming up to, it's quite a steep climb, so apologies for it being in the heat. This is up above us now is the old Iron Age fort, hence why it's called Castle Hill. So this was up there, right at the top is an old castle. These fields here are permanent pasture fields. They have been since the dawn of agriculture started around here. But they are very shallow soil. Owen, you do woodcock ringing here, don't you? But I say we'll have a quick stop here, and another point I like to make. I think one thing we really noticed a lot was in the gateways of all even the old fields before we even started this grazing. The gateways always seem to have the best looking grass. Even in some of the old fields, you think a field where it's full of Yorkshire fog, and you think, well, this isn't any good. And you go through the gateway, and there's ryegrasses, clovers that we've never seeded. You think, well, why are they there? Okay, there's a bit bare there, but around the edges. And so I think the big thing to take from that, obviously not where it's bare, but the impact that the animals can have, the density, the way they can trample, the way they dung, the way they can move through the swards, and cattle are much easier to get that effect of how can they, without putting seed in, almost reseed areas. So how can we take from the gateway to the whole field? And I was talking to some people over lunch where we might be looking at, with cattle particularly, setting up electric fences, giving them a day's graze, but within that day splitting it down to 2 or 3 grazes in that day, having an electric fence timer that will go off at a set time, and the cattle, in theory, then it'll take a bit of time to train them, but move themselves. That way then you get the density, the trampoline effect that we're looking for, that whatever they don't eat is going pushed back into the soil, back to the ground. That way we can cycle organic matter, that stuff is broken down, and in theory we get healthier, better quality pasture. Yet at the same time we will not be overgrazing. Like I said, this sort of stuff, there's not lots of pasture here, but if we take more than 50% of that forage away, with this weather as it is, these fields are going to burn. So it's going to be a bit of careful management, but by having high density of animals, they're not going to overgraze. So yeah, if you look up behind us there, that's the top of our land, the hill up there. So when Owen did his study and he's talked about the highest soil organic carbon content on the farm, that is up there, which was staggering to all of us, because you'd in theory think that's very shallow soil, not good quality soil.
And it is shallow.
And I speaking to some people who live in the village, speaking to them in the pub, they remember taking hay off there, crops of hay off there, 50 odd years ago, and storing it in the hay barn up there. But to their memory, they cannot remember it being reseeded, tilled, or nothing. So what we had done up there, we had one big 60-acre block of land up there. That was just, the animals went in, they had probably 3 weeks, and they came back again. And then what we did, we split them to 3, and we thought, we're getting somewhere now. And then lastly, we split into 6. And because we would like to improve the pasture up there even more to get better production. Next year we're talking about taking cattle up there. But this winter the plan is, because we've come out of we were in the Glacier scheme, so we had to grow corn. To grow the corn, we put a brassica break in, so we had a winter crop for our animals. This year we're not doing that, so we're going to have to do it from grass. We're aiming for, we're going to need from November through to beginning of January enough grass to keep the ewes out all that time without feeding silage. That's the plan. So up there is the ideal starting place. It's quite dry, fairly free draining soil. So that's had its last graze now. That's going to be there for 90 days. We'll go there throughout September, see what we got. Beginning of November, the ewes will go up there, and we'll start grazing around 3-day breaks, so 3-day grazes. And so we'll go crazy with electric fences. It's going to be quite fun, or not fun. And we're gonna split the fields down, and we're aiming for 60 days grazing off there. Another field that you can't see, we'll see further up, that's just basically where the buildings are, just beyond the other side of the main road. That's a slightly wetter, heavier field where Owen has done some woodcock studying. And in terms of farming, in terms of a farmer's field, it's not good quality land. But we couldn't reseed it, even if we wanted to, we couldn't turn around and say we're going to plough this, because if you went to NRW and said, can we plough this? They'd turn around and say no. So the plan is we're going to outwinter on there. That'd be the first place of outwintering. The ewes will go there first before going up to the hill. And the reason behind that is last year we outwintered on some fields further up, and in fields we had lots of moss in, and the ewes, having the ewes over the winter there, they pushed all the moss out, and in the spring ryegrasses, clovers, fescues, timothys were coming back. So that said quite a lot to us. So if we can have that sort of impact on those fields where they are, we couldn't reseed them even if we wanted to, but they're very unproductive at the moment, we're going to give it a go. And it might look a bit messy at first, but it won't be proper compaction, it'll be very superficial. And by the time we get to May again, it'll be back to green pasture.
Can I make a point about those? There are 2 fields side by side there that are very good comparison. There's the one you've just described. Yeah, there's the one that Peter's just described that hasn't been cultivated, and there's one next door to it that was cultivated quite recently. There were more woodcock on the cultivated field, and significant, as I was talking before about stone burden, that there was a lot of stone burden through the soil column on the cultivated field. both very similar aspect, similar elevation, so a good comparison. And I think some of the data that we're going to be looking at is taking two fields that are very similar, but have been treated in different ways to learn lessons from that. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll carry on. The next gateway is just straight up. If you ever stop here, we'll look back behind us there, so you can see the village there. And if you can just about carry on looking, there's beyond the village, beyond the houses, there's a group of lambs down there. So that used to be a separate farm, this old riverland called Glen Raven, and so we've done a lot of reseeding there recently because of the Loxdale scheme we were in. So we had to grow corn because of the scheme. So we grew a brassica brake, and you can't see them from here, but there was two fields last year, sorry, where we had grazed them before Christmas time, and then we had a lot of rain in January. And those two fields were bare soil and they were underwater for 2 months. So you kind of looked at that and thinking, well, when it's right next to the river, that's not good enough. And it was costing us, I just said to a few gentlemen now, you know, we won't lie, we worked out the way we were reseeding to go to grass, back to grass again after about 4 years, it was costing us about £4,000 a hectare, you know, which is quite a significant cost. So even though after a few years after the grass had started establishing, the results were pretty good, for that price, that cost, it wasn't good enough. So they have gone back. We put them back to a mixed species sward now. That contains your ryegrasses, your clovers, red and white, cocksfoot, because at this time of year, very shallow soil there, it's prone to burning off. Cocksfoot's very deep rooted, so access different parts, access moisture for longer. Different heading dates, we've got Timothy and chicory and plantain. So the lambs now are grazing through there. I moved them this morning at 6 o'clock this morning, I think. They're grazing on some fields that have been cut for silage earlier this year, and they will be grazing for no more in one area than 2 days at the moment. The reason being the grass has only just started to come after that really difficult spring we had. So if we overgraze it now, the weeds are going to get ahead of us again. So as we can't spray them off, we've got to be really careful. These lambs are then going to go round, and it will be about 30 days before they come back to where they're going. We're going to add some more fields into their rotation, just to really push them on now and sell them. And that is also partly because we're a bit understocked at the moment, so we got more fields with lots of surplus grass that we don't need. So that's a big lesson for us. So that's why we talked about the wintering policy we're going to do this year. Quite frankly, the stubble turnips weren't working for us. For other people, they might well do, but with our system, it just wasn't working. So we're really going to focus on just producing grass. In this part of the world, we get plenty of rain. We're in quite a temperate climate. We can produce lots and lots of grass. And Dad always used to say God gave us 3 fantastic phenomenons. First one is the soil. You know, it's all amazing. We all rely on the soil to live. The second is the ability of photosynthesis, to convert energy from the sun to produce forage and pasture. And the third is the ability to ruminate, and the ability to turn that pasture into really good quality top level protein. And in this part of the world, we truly believe it can be done in a sustainable way by grazing this way, not overgrazing, keeping a growing living root going into the soil. Even though we haven't got that much soil, at least we're accessing all of the soil profile. And you know, there's lots of science going on. There's lots of research into carbon sequestration. It's not all about carbon sequestration for us, but that is a big part of where we might be going in the future. I think it was Lee talking about selling carbon credits, or was it Andrew? So, you know, this is all things to think about. So, yeah, and then so I did here as well, in a healthy soil, in a teaspoon of healthy soil, there is more life, microbial life, than there is humans on Earth. So when you think of that, you kind of think, well, if we got bare soil underwater for 2 months a year, you know, what are we doing? We're asking that soil to work for us and feed our crops, feed our animals, and all we've done is gone and battered the hell out of it. So it's really kind of changed the way we're thinking about what we're doing, and how can we really integrate our livestock to improve our pasture, but also help improve our soil health at the same time. Another thing I'd add on to, I just been talking about worm burdens. So I did mention earlier, with the lambs particularly, tried to move them at least 3 days, no longer, just to try to break the cycle, give them a 21-day rest period, aiming for 25 days. But we do fecal egg counts. So on another mixed species sward, we have the other end of the farm where we have our our best lambs in theory growing. We did a fecal egg count recently. We expected them to have quite a high worm burden, and we didn't. So there's a lot of stuff saying about mixed species swards, the herbs, chicory and plantain. Do they have an effect in terms of anthelmintic natural anthelmintics? We can't statistically say that they do, but they obviously have helped in some way. So yeah, we'll carry on. Yeah, we were drying. So this, to be honest, this is a bit of a. This is grazed harder than we normally would graze. The reason this is because those usually getting dried off. So they only weaned last week, so we don't want to give them too much grass, otherwise they stop milking basically. So yeah, ideally we wouldn't graze this hard. But before, last year we were grazing at this. And like I said before, if you are a conventional farmer or dairy farm, you're putting slurry and nitrogen back on, it will carry on growing as long as you've got moisture there. But we were finding that the regrowth was quite slow. So yeah, so ideally we leave a bit more than that, but that's simply why. So normally we wouldn't graze as hard, or this year we haven't grazed as hard. And the reason we've kind of joined up with the GWCT in many ways in terms of asking advice is we have abundant brown hare there. There's peat bogs, there's abundant wildlife that we want to enhance that. We could have gone with the theory, let's go with sprays and chemicals, ploughed it all over, reseeded. We watch lots of videos what's going on in America where they haven't done that, they just integrated cattle, and Phil gave us a lot of advice for that. And we've given it a go, and the differences we've seen have been absolutely phenomenal. Unfortunately, we can't go there, it's too far away, but if people want to come back, they're more than welcome. But there's lots of exciting stuff going on there. Not just from a farming point of view, from conservation point of view as well. Right. So I was just going to say, before we go into this field, they're making hay in there, so just be careful. But this was a field last year that we were thinking of, 2 years ago, sorry, we were talking about reseeding this. And we're very glad we haven't, and now we're making hay off it. So what we did with this field, it was grazed as one big, it's called 20 acres, it's a 20 acre field. We're not very inventive with names around here, but it was one big field, and it was just a case of, once again, put the stock in, 100, 200 sheep going in there, and all they ever did was stayed at the top or went down to the bottom, that was it. And then 4 days later, whatever, they came out again. So we split it into three, we put a permanent fence at the top, and then a semi-permanent electric fence at the bottom, halfway down, 3/4 of the way down. And then after this, once the grass starts regrowing, the lambs will be coming here, and we'll split these fields down again. So there'll be electric fence going there, and then that will probably be split 1, 2, 3 again. So we'll get at least 2 days of each bit, so it better be 6 days overall on a field that if we gave them 6 days, we'd have issues with worms. After the first day, they picked all the best stuff out of it, so then there's not good quality grass anymore. So yeah, by moving them regularly, it sounds a lot of work, but you keep good quality grass from them all the time. So yeah, that's how we think about it. And I'm dead keen on doing electric fences, so maybe I'm a bit weird, but yeah. But we'll carry on through over. I'll just wait for everyone to catch up, but I was asked earlier, what are the fields on the heat map Owen was highlighting? This is one of the main ones. This is one of the main fields where the woodcock are found, and the next field over. So I don't know, Owen, if you want to talk about that at all.
Yeah, where are you?
Just here.
Yeah, that's this is 16 acre field here. I'm just hearing Peter talking, waxing lyrical about putting fences out, and thinking, well, that's all well and good, but when it comes to walking over these fields to ring woodcock at night, it's a lot of hard work getting over fences. But I can see that there's a sense of that. Yeah. So yeah, these are two really important fields for my woodcock ring, but I actually go all the way up, as you saw on the map earlier, right up to the far end there. And the next field here is 20 acre field, which is the one that I pointed out had very high, 16 acre field, this is 20. Yeah. The one beyond is 16 acre that has high density of woodcock in it. Yeah. And so these two fields are quite good for comparison. They're fairly similar in aspect and altitude, so it must be down to soil.
And I think to add on, because Owen was talking about potentially, that field over there where there has actually been more woodcock, a bit kind of controversial, what we've been saying all day, has been tilled more recently. But I think because it is a main cutting field, we leave it over the winter earlier. So there's probably a higher sward in there compared to this would be grazed. This would be grazed right up to November. That won't be grazed. By September it'll be left. So what Owen alluded to about having a higher sward and might be more desirable for a woodcock, go feeding at night time, that could also be part of play. It's so difficult. There's so many variables to quantify and add into that. So
I just wanted to add into that actually the top of that field there is where we had a number of non-worm invertebrates. So I was talking earlier on about there might be something in those being desirable for birds, and so right on the top there, which is where you always get a lot of birds, Reseeding leather jacket and chafer larvae and wireworm.
I'll speak on the mic. We've seen some, just speaking here, about do woodcock or the ground nesting birds prefer, sorry, not ground nesting birds, do woodcock prefer cattle or sheep graze pastures? And the difference we notice in cattle as a land management tool, they are so much easier in terms of electric fences, but the impact they have is quicker. So you can't see it from here, but there's a bungalow there, there's a telegraph pole right in front of us, and beyond there's a bungalow. And there's a block of land out there called Hendra High. That used to be one big, or two big, there's a stream running between the middle and 2 blocks of ground. And the gates were just, we used to leave the gates open. It was difficult, we didn't have water systems out there. This last autumn, a lot of investment has gone on, a lot of work to put water systems out there, fences, and improving the tracks and everything to get the animals out there. We've got the cattle have been out there pretty much all summer now. We'd like to bring them back, and before it was just really poor sward, and now there is white clovers, there are ryegrasses, there's all the things we want, and we're now talking about taking young ewes out there to build them up. So the difference we've seen with the cattle has been phenomenal, and they're easy. You go and see the cattle every day, single strand electric fence, is easy to move them. I also talked about earlier when we were back inside about this public good for public money, public money for public good, sorry, and woodland creation. And if you look down there where it's very rough down there, that is abundant in the winter with snipe. So that is a sort of as a farmer here, and if someone said to you, right, here's a grant to plant trees, you have to do it, or you might as well take the money to do it. I'm not going to plant trees in the field where they're making hay, I'm going to put them there. But the problem is then, we're losing that habitat. And that habitat, that peat bog, is sequestering plenty of carbon as well. So these are things that, it's quite difficult for me anyway, to get my head around why is all this money coming our way when actually it's not thought through necessarily in the right context. Over there, basically, it's hard to explain again, where that bungalow is, the field's up basically to the left of that, that's our boundary, and we're growing mixed species swards up there. So like the ones down where I showed you earlier where the lambs were, and they were, this time last year we were walking through them, we had some rain, but they were waterlogged. So they were seeded last year, and we'd obviously knocked the soil about a bit, because yes, they're heavier fields, but in the summer you should not be walking on waterlogged fields, not really, not after a week's rain. So we thought, hang on, and we'd done lots of drainage up there, we'd done lots of stuff up there, so we thought, hang on, there's something going wrong here. These mixed species swards, if you go in there now, we've got chicory plants up to here, plantain up to here, there's cocksfoot in there. They often say if the plant's up here, the roots double below the ground. So there's no doubt, because we had quite heavy rain a couple of weeks ago, there's no doubt that is helping condition the soil, utilise the water more effectively, and also and just improve the overall soil health. It's difficult to quantify. It's all anecdotal really, but these observations are quite important from our point of view. Yeah. That is true of the docks and thistles. Often people could drive past it, is that docks growing there, or is it chicory? But yeah,
One of the reasons why I wanted to turn the other way was to walk through the silage field, which is the next field up, what we call 16 acres. And the reason for that was we've recently put muck on. Having taken our first cut of silage, we've put muck on that, which some people say you shouldn't do because it'll come in with the next cut of silage. So we'll be taking a second cut off that. On our way back down to the farm, we're going to go and look at our muck store, which was my baby last year, which I'm very proud of. And Phil Couch, when we built that, I thought we'd just store the muck for a couple of years and let it compost. And then Phil Coucher put us on to turning it regularly, which is something he's done. And what we found is we can compost that really quite nicely in about 3 months. So the muck that's gone out on those fields was the muck that we got last winter. So rather than dumping it in field piles and watching all the nutrients be washed out of it and the stuff never composting properly, we put that on. We bought our own muck spreader so we can do that ourselves, because we felt that, you know, soil nutrition is just a key part and you've got to take charge of it yourself. And if we walked those fields, you wouldn't see, apart from a couple of small clumps, you would not see the muck. So it's gone that quickly. And we think that's a positive move.
Does your muck keep covered?
You'll see in a few minutes.
Yeah, so also adding on, you're probably thinking now as well, to be honest, and you know, we're not hiding away from this fact. Looking at here, you think, where are the stock? Like I said quite a few times now, we are heavily understocked. We've only just started changing the grazing system, started last year. We're overstocked. This year we've been understocked. So hopefully next year will be somewhere in between. But, you know, we spend enough money on other things, other grazing infrastructure to, you know, we don't need to go out and spend lots of money on stock now. Saying that, we're going to be on to buy some new lambs soon. But yeah, so there are lambs somewhere just behind the wood, and there are ewes about that, you know, like so we got 3 groups of lambs going around, 2 groups of ewes. We have 3 mobs of cattle about, so, and then we'll soon have another group of ewes as well. So yeah, you can't see them at the moment, but they're hiding away somewhere, but they are there, don't worry. But yeah, we'll carry on then. We'll head back down to the lane, and then we'll head back down to the farm slowly, which is just down the lane. It's all downhill from here. Probably got a bit lazy, to be honest. I probably should have split the field in half that way, so they got access to the water, and then grazed them in cells with another fence across. This morning you can just about see the faint line of where I have moved the fence from, and I put the fence again, so this is split into 4. So they're going to have, in the end, and it's not good practice, like if we had more water points further up the field, we wouldn't have to do this. I could back fence them so they don't come back to where they grazed before, but they will get 12 days of grazing off this field, and because I've given them every 3 days a new bit of grass, except to come back for water, they're not going to come back onto this bit they've already grazed. So these lambs will go around this field. They'll then have 9 days in the next field, and I'm probably going to not be so lazy, and I will split it with the fence down the middle, and then so I can get a longer recovery period. They'll have 6 days on this field, maybe 8, and then they'll have to go back to another field for 2 days, and then they're back to here. Back to 25 days rest back on here. And the theory is they haven't grazed it that intensely, but by the time they come back, there should be double the amount of grass that they went into in the first place. So we do this with all our lambs. With the bigger groups, I have 2 fences ready to go in front of them. And like I said, if we can add a few more water points, that's the next big investment to do. Or if I wasn't so lazy and put a few more back fences in, we could then intensify the grazing pressure like we've done here, but stop them coming back where they grazed before. So we could, in theory, grow even more pasture. And that's what we're doing with the other groups of lambs, but because there's only 100 lambs here, it's not really been worthwhile going too excessive. I mean, these fields, yeah, we've got a bit of a weed burden issue in these fields, but, you know, I don't know about you, Dad, I've never seen clover in these pastures like that before. Not since being organic anyway, from my memory. So they are improving no end. You know, they really are improving no end. And like I said, we're nowhere near where we'd like to be, but it's always a lesson. So yeah, we'll carry on now. We'll look at Dad's baby, the muck shed, and then we'll have a bit of a wrap up, I think. So yeah.
How much water do they actually need?
You can probably, I mean, yeah, it's really hard. I mean, they say a dairy cow.
You just see bits of straw going out. And I was moaning about the cost of straw, which we use for bedding the animals. And Peter, my son, said, but that's organic matter that's going into the soil. That's a valuable commodity. So suddenly you realise you've actually got 2 things for the price of 1, so to speak. So they came up with this Sustainable Production Grant a couple of years ago. And I went off on the Farming Connect meeting to get myself licensed to apply for that. And I put in an application for a covered muck store. Nowadays, you can put in an application for a covered muck store. We had to put in for a concrete bunded base and walls and a roof, so we did it as separate things. But it was a 40% grant, and I estimated that 40% would come to 24,000, and that was a bit of an underestimate. To my immense surprise, we proceeded through the application process. I thought we weren't going to get anywhere. And we eventually got to a stage where somebody started ringing me up and asking me to fill out more forms and a lot of detailed questions. And I said, am I just wasting? Oh, the first thing he said is, shall I send these to your agent? And I said, I haven't got an agent, I'm doing this myself, which says quite a lot about grant applications, I think. And I said to him, are we actually going to get this if I go jump through all these hoops? And he said, yes, you are. So to my amazement, we got the grant. So we got a bit under 40% of the cost of this. And we started building this just before lockdown last year. And because it was a construction project, they went ahead and carried on and completed it. And based on what Phil Coucher has told us, we're turning this regularly. And we think that it can go out in the muck spreader after about 12 weeks. I initially built this thinking we'd want to let it compost by itself for a period of 2 years. So we'd split it originally into 3 bays with these concrete panels. And then we realised that was actually a bit unmanageable. So this is the second half of last winter's muck, and the first half has gone out already. And we think it's making a difference. So a lot of people probably wouldn't see much in it, but I'm very proud of it. And I think it's going to be here in quite a long time because the walls are 14-inch thick of reinforced concrete.
But are you aerating?
Well, we're aerating it by turning it.
So are you physically going to lift all that up and put it?
Yeah, we're lifting it up with a telehandler and shifting it, which I agree is an inefficient process. And there are alternatives. I mean, there is a technique for ensiling it and putting some bugs in and letting it do that naturally. The Austrians have a technique called, it's not furlough, but it's a name similar to that, where they put it in long strips and then water it to keep the temperature right. And they say that works quite well. But, you know, we haven't got the land and we haven't necessarily got the weather. You know, you can go for weeks where you just rain. You can't get on the land. So it's in here. And the other thing is we've cut this groove here to catch the effluent, and that's tanked over to a tank over there. So that's the nearest thing we've got to slurry, and we put that out on a field. We had a couple of fields next door to each other, exactly the same reseeds. We put this on one side, huge difference. You could see in a week, you could see a difference.
Why have you separated the horse muck?
I don't know.
I don't know. I think that might have been a practical joke. You guys will hear them.
One thing that you might be able to do, because you've got woodland, is I just thinking of wood chip, because wood chip in amongst this is quite good. So that's a possibility here. If you are doing work in the woodland, you've got, rubbishy wood that you think, oh, what can we do with it? Chip it and put it in here.
Well, interesting you say that, because we had a whole lot of wood chip last year, which we put down underneath the cattle.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So some wood chip has gone out. If you talk to people about, I mean, the idea of the wood chip is that it really encourages the mycorrhizal fungi. Yeah. And the issue with muck is it's probably high in bacteria, but that it may disturb your bacterial fungal mix. And that's something your son Phil is really looking into, and we'll be picking his brains on that. And the other thing
going into it is that cardboard won't be being mixed into it.
That cardboard may be getting mixed into it, yeah. I mean, that will disappear. We make sure all the plastic's gone off it before that goes in, because we hate having plastic going out in the muck spreader. But we did put some wood chip in. What people say is the wood chip sucks a lot of nitrogen out of the ground. And so there's a little bit of work to be done on that, although I think that if it's well composted, that problem may not exist. And hopefully the wood chips absorbed a lot of urine, which is of course rich in nitrogen, so maybe it even puts a bit back. But
I know at Blind Camel, which is Clearon, they've got organic veg farm there, and they've got their own turning machine, and they put a lot of wood chip into theirs for compost for veg growing. So they find it very good. So yeah. I think it's better than having a bonfire, isn't it? With the trash.
Yeah.
You use wood chip, rather than wood pellets, do you?
Well, wood, yeah. I mean, we're not burning wood chip.
No, I mean on bedding.
Yeah, it was chip that we did ourselves. Yeah, we wouldn't buy it in at the moment, although we might look at that. But we've got enough woodland to be able to do that. We're just not sure how good a bedding system it is. But I know a lot of other people are using it. So, I mean, I dream at night about how I could have put in an automated turning system. And I also dream about making it twice as big, but and I wish this phone would stop going off. Yeah, well, as I say, one of the reasons why I wanted to walk that silage field was to show you what, you know, six weeks after mucking it, what's happened with this year's muck, and I think you'd be pretty impressed with that. Most of it's disappeared, and as part of this project, we bought a telehandler to handle this, but we needed one anyway. And then the other thing I bought is our own muck spreader. And I did that because I wanted us to be in charge of our field nutrition, of our soil nutrition, and also for biosecurity purposes. You know, so if we've got disease on the farm, we'll keep it here, but I didn't want somebody else's disease coming in. So that was the theory behind that. And we got a good deal on a second-hand muck spreader, and you know, we can put little and often on. And that I believe is going to work well for us, and to date seems to be working okay.
So do you produce enough for the farm?
You can never have enough, can you? And you know, realistically, I should have made this bigger.
Every building in the country, every farm building in the country
should have been bigger, yeah. And so we've applied for another grant to build one on one of the outlying farms, and we'll see if we get away with that one too. But if we don't, we'll probably build it anyway. Because I think handling, as an organic farmer, I think handling this stuff is just really at the beginning of our process. And if we don't get this right, we might as well pack up and go and, you know, do something else.
And you've got the stock numbers to produce them.
We're building up to that, you know, building up with more cattle. You know, we had a we had an imbalance between our cattle and our sheep. And I think that doesn't work well on certainly an organic farm. So we're building the cattle numbers up, and yeah.
Would this heat up well enough to kill things like that?
I think it will, yeah. I mean, it's pretty, you know, when it first gets piled up in there, the first few times you turn it, and if we turned it now, it would probably be pretty steamy. Yeah, so I think it does. You know, whether it kills stuff like Johnny's, which is a worry, I, you know, don't know.
Better than being in the field, though.
Yeah, for sure. And we're retaining that material, really.